Hey guys, Lokai here. I just woke up, so this video is bound to be a complete mess, but I'm gonna do it anyway because I'm an idiot. Also, I have some, stuff in the background that might be making noise. I have fans on, and I have an air conditioner on because it's fucking hot. So, yeah, I'm gonna keep them on. Sorry if you hear them. I'll try to stay as far away from them as I possibly can, but they might bleed into the background. I'm gonna make this as quick as I possibly can. Hopefully it won't go beyond 50 minutes, because I don't think there's too much to say about Pokemon Champions just yet. It's not really much to the game just yet, but yeah, that's what I'm going to be talking about. I'm going to be giving you my first thoughts on Pokemon Champions. I figured I would, talk about it since I talked about Pokemon last time. I did also show a picture of Pokemon Violet and Legends Arceus. I will go into more detail on them later on. One, because I haven't finished Legends Arceus yet. I did finish Violet, but I have not finished Legends Arceus. And I figure it might be better to go into more detail with Champions as it gets more updates because, well, there will be more to talk about. So, Pokemon Champions was a game that, when I first saw it, I was so excited. Because I thought it was just, so you guys know about the Dexit controversy. If you're a Pokemon fan, even a casual one, you know about the Dexit controversy. I was very upset by that. Of course, little did I know that the franchise would sink to even newer lows that would make the loss of Pokemon look quaint by comparison, but that has already been discussed in a previous video, so I won't waste too much more of your time. Point is, I was very upset by that, and but I thought that maybe like a good compromise would be to give Pokemon Home some sort of battle capabilities, or some sort of content to, let us do something with our Pokemon, just for the sake of doing something with them. Because really, that was the biggest problem with the Dexit situation, was that so many Pokemon at the time were trapped, and knowing what we know about Pokemon Legends ZA and how Pokemon will be trapped once again if they are transferred to ZA, yeah, it's pretty shitty, Game Freak. I swear to fucking God, this goddamn company. My biggest problem with the Dexit controversy was that every Pokemon that we've collected, was able to be transferred through, and now it's just suddenly not. But because Sword and Shield wouldn't have all of the Pokemon, we just wouldn't... So many Pokemon would just be stuck in Purgatory. Pokemon Purgatory, basically. And, they did eventually increase the Dex, and it actually was, like, a big increase. It was, like, almost double. But it was like, oh, well, you're so close to the full amount, why didn't you just add all of them? Couldn't you have just added the rest via an update or whatever? But they didn't do that. They eventually released more games, and eventually all of the Pokemon became usable in at least one of the games, which is nice, but it's still pretty shitty that you had to buy a bunch of games just so you can use Pokemon you wanted to use, or you wanted to transfer. And yeah, I know it's not a big deal to some people, but as someone who has formed an attachment to certain Pokemon that I've used, yeah, it does mean something to me, Okay, maybe, it just wasn't feasible with the amount of games they were rushing out of their ass. So maybe a good idea would be to have a battle sim inside of Pokemon Home. Or maybe make a new stadium game where we're able to use all of the Pokemon. Maybe even add, like, Terastallizing and Z-Crystals and Mega Evolution and, Dynamaxing. But yeah, I thought, like, a new stadium game as an idea would be cool. Especially because there are so many weird generational gimmicks now. Maybe having a new stadium game, a new battle sim game, would be a good idea. They could even use it to sort of have the multiplayer be separate from the single player, so they can do more with the single player games. Maybe even deliver some of those higher quality animations they lied to us about. Well, they did give us that game in the form of Pokemon Champions, and not for nothing, I was excited. I was really excited. Then my excitement died a lot when I heard that not every Pokemon would be available at launch. Again, I swear to God, this fucking company. So, I was annoyed by that, and I was just like, well, that kills most of my excitement, and more of my excitement dampened the more we heard about Pokemon Champions, as did a lot of fans, to be honest. It was a free-to-play game, which was kind of nice, but also kind of worrying, because free-to-play games tend to be like mobile games, and now, it was announced that Champions would be a mobile and Switch title. It would be for both. The mobile version is actually coming out in like 6 or 7 days. Don't make the frickin' meme. Don't you dare. It was always meant to be a mobile title, but it was also one of those where it's like, free-to-play mobile titles usually have some kind of crummy microtransactions and shit. And I was really worried about that. Thankfully, some of my worries were quelled a little bit, and for what it's worth, I will actually say this up front. Pokemon Champions is actually fairly solid as a free-to-play experience, if you are a fan of the franchise. More on that when I get to it. But if you're a fan of the franchise already, even just a casual fan, if you have Pokemon from Pokemon Home, it's a solid free-to-play experience. It's not bad at all. If you're not a Pokemon fan, that's where it gets a little dicey. They announced a starter pack, which was actually something a lot of free-to-play games do. I actually did buy it, and not for nothing, I thought it was a pretty okay deal. I know people bitched about the lack of box space, and believe me, I do think that them charging for box space is absolutely stupid, but I think the starter pack is $7 or $8. That's fine, and you get like 50 box spaces. You actually can unlock more box space if you go through the ranks, and if you go through the ranked battles and rank up by, to Great Ball and Ultra Ball, which I know is a little difficult for some people to do if they're not really knowledgeable on Pokemon, but you'll probably get there eventually. It's only a matter of time. And, I up to this point, I have, I think, 90 Pokemon box spaces, which I would say is pretty solid. I would say is pretty good. So, I think overall, if you're not too fussy about having, like, unlimited box space nearly, I think the starter pack is a decent enough compromise. I still think that it would have been better if they didn't charge for it, especially since we're already paying for Pokemon Home, but fine, I will begrudgingly allow it, because I haven't really been impeded by box space, with, like, maybe one exception, kind of, sort of. I'll get to that when I get to that. It has something to do with the way you recruit Pokemon. Point is, the more that came out about the game, the more I was worried about it. I was always going to give it a chance because it was a free-to-play game, but I was very, very concerned. Another thing I was also concerned about was the lack of IVs. Now, EVs and IVs have always been a controversial thing in Pokemon, and I have a very complicated opinion on this. On one hand, training up Pokemon via their EVs and IVs, especially in the older games, mainly the older games, sucks ass, because they made the system so rigid and so dumb, and I don't understand why they did this. Thankfully, as the generations went on, and this is something I will give the Switch titles because they helped with this, they made Nature's and IVs and EVs a lot less rigid. EVs became fully customizable in Generation 5, so that was awesome. The EV system was mostly fixed. The IV system was done way better in Generation 6, and then even more so in 7, where it became easier to get Pokemon with, more max IVs, which made breeding a lot easier. They made breeding in general for Pokemon with good IVs a lot easier as well. Generation 7 added Hyper Training and Bottle Caps, and a lot of that was brought over to the Switch games, and with the Switch games, they brought in one of my favorite features, Nature Mints, which I think is great for both casual and competitive, because sometimes you catch a Pokemon and it's not a very good nature, and so it lags behind, and you just feel, why do I want an Alakazam with an adamant nature when Alakazam is known as a special attacker? Well, if you have a Nature Mint, just change it to modern. Just change it to modest. I don't know why I said modern. I think I had Sonic on the mind. As an example, for my recent Violet playthrough, I got a Surledge, but it was a timid nature. And if you know about Surledge's base stats, it's not very good when it comes to special attacking. So I used a adamant nature when it evolved, and it, now is actually capable of, taking hits. Now, it would eventually bring over that Surledge over to Pokemon Champions, which was really cool, to use, like, one of my team members in Pokemon Violet and bring it over to Champions and actually deal out some decent damage with it against one of my friends. That was a pretty cool feeling. And, yeah, a lot of those things were improved. But there were still some issues, mainly with the IV system. So the IV system actually has a little bit more nuance to it than people think, because when it comes to the IV system, there are different different levels. IV levels can be like from 0 to 31. And a lot of people usually like to have 0 speed IVs in order to use Trick Room. Basically a Trick Room team. If you're a Pokemon fan, you probably know about this. But if you don't, basically, the lower your speed is, if you use Trick Room has it to where the lowest speed stat now goes first. And so you would want your Pokemon to have the lowest possible speed in order to ensure that they would go first. Sometimes, in order to trick your opponent, you wouldn't have perfect IVs and speed. Sometimes you would only have fantastic or decent. For special attackers always benefit from 0 attack IVs, especially with things like confusion or foul play. But now, all of that is gone, because IVs have basically been removed. Well, not removed, they've more like whenever you transfer a Pokemon up, the Pokemon just has max IVs. Every Pokemon now has stats as if they had max IVs from the main series, so the stats mostly match. And they changed up the EV system a little bit. It's not much of a change. Basically, when it came to the EV system, you had 510 EVs. No matter how many EVs you sunk into any stat, there was always 2 EVs left over that just kind of didn't really matter. They made it so those 2 EVs can now have a stat point. Basically, now, instead of 510, it's almost as if you have 512. The point is, EVs have been replaced with stat points. Stat points are basically the same as EVs, especially if you calculate them, but they added an additional stat point increase. Because again, like I said, with the 510 EVs that you have for a Pokemon, you're always going to have 2 that are just sitting there that are just doing nothing. So, what was the point of having them? Well, Pokemon Champions thought of that, and now it just gives you another stat point to add, basically almost like an additional 2 EVs, because 4 EVs equal a stat boost. That's how the math works in the OG games, in the main series. Now, they simplified it a lot. It was a lot simpler. Basically, the equivalent of 510 EVs would be 65 stat points in Champions. But now they increased it by 1 in order to kind of round out everything. That's how it works. You can look into it yourself, because I'm not even going to remotely go into the math of it, because Bro, I just fucking woke up. You really want me to do math? But yeah, that's how the EV system works now. And it also works a little better as well because now it's in the form of sliders, stat sliders. And not for nothing, that's pretty cool. I actually would not mind if this kind of became a thing for the main series, but, you know, wishful thinking. It probably is just going to be for champions because every Pokemon gives out EVs in the main series. They're probably gonna want to keep that. But I wouldn't mind if they decided to translate that to the main series, because it is a lot simpler. But as for IVs, though, every Pokemon now has basically max IVs, or at least they act as if it has max IVs. The IV system is just not in the game, but every Pokemon's stats are as if they had max IVs. So now every Pokemon is kind of sort of at an equal playing field, and I felt like you were sanding off some depth. The IV system, even with all of the improvements made in generations 5 to 9, was never perfect, because some Pokemon would prefer to have 0 IVs in the stats, some Pokemon would prefer to have specific tiers of IVs in order to kind of mix it up and kind of trick opponents. Wolfie actually has a couple of strategies, and he talks about a couple of things. I would recommend Wolfie VGC if you're just interested in Pokemon VGC stuff. Hell, if you're seeing this video, you probably already watch him, so, you know. But yeah, there's a bunch of strategies you can look into. I'm not going to go into every single one of them, but basically, the problem with the IV system is that you either had what the game gave to you, which was whatever IVs the Pokemon had, or you had max IVs, because Hyper Training would max out IVs, except that's all it would do. And, you know, that was a big problem because some Pokemon genuinely do not want speed IVs because they work better on Trick Room teams. Some Pokemon want specific IVs in order to use certain abilities better. And, there was a bit of skill expression there, but because of the removal of IVs, all of that is now gone. That's not to say that Trick Room teams can't work, but Trick Room isn't as powerful as it used to be. Many other moves aren't as powerful as they used to be. Confusion, I think, probably has a huge buff. So that's nice at least, I guess, but it's unfortunate. And a lot of people were celebrating, and it was just like, you know, I kind of felt like what they could have done better was, instead of just having, like, IVs removed altogether, why not make them less rigid? Because that was the problem, was that they were so rigid and so annoying to deal with. Why not just make the IV system less rigid? You did that with the EV system. I don't see why you can't do it with the IV system, but no, they just removed it. Is it the end of the world? No, it's not. And honestly, it does make getting into competitive Pokemon a lot easier. But I do feel like that you did sacrifice some depth that could have been there for the sake of accessibility and simplicity, and I'm not big on that, but it's not the end of the world. I was very mixed on that, but I understand that the Pokemon fandom has been very 50-50 split on this. So I'm personally in the camp of, I think it was a bit of a mistake. It's not, it doesn't ruin the game, but it does kind of feel like you could have gone about it better, you know what I mean? But that's how I personally feel about it. It's just, in my opinion, I personally feel like they could have done something a bit different. But whatever, it's not the end of the world. It does help because my friend, who is less of a, into competitive Pokemon, granted, I was more competitive-minded, I wasn't really fully competitive until Champions, but he doesn't go into the competitive scene and look into it as much as I do, so for him it was really easy to kind of get into the game. So, again, there were benefits to this. It's just, I feel like they could have gone about it better, but what's done is done. Thankfully, any EVs you accumulated in the main series actually do carry over the first time you transfer one of your Pokemon from home to Champions. So the EV system still has value, especially if you want to save on VP, which is the currency of the game, which I will talk about in a bit. But yeah, that's how the EV and IV system work now. A couple of disappointments here and there, but there's good and bad to it. Ultimately, I think it's mostly fine, and it's very accessible, which is what it needed to be. But I do feel like the removal of IVs does remove a bit of depth and skill expression that could have been there. I'm sure we'll find new ways to express ourselves. Again, it doesn't ruin anything. I just feel like they could have gone about it better, but that's just me. Anywho, now that I'm done with that spiel, I will actually talk about the release of the game and how much of a shit show it was. So, even now, Pokemon Champions has gotten a very bad rep, and it's honestly pretty deserved. So, another thing that worried me about its announcement was the company that was working on it. Game Freak themselves were not the only ones working on this game. They were working on it with ILCA. And if you don't know who ILCA is, they're responsible for Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl. Yay! So yeah, that worried me a bit. They also worked on Pokemon Home. And Pokemon Home is... it's pretty bare bones. So honestly, it's not even really a game. So yeah, that also dampened my excitement. But who knows, maybe in a collaboration with Game Freak, maybe there wouldn't be really bad bugs, like the HP meter bugging out and healing a Pokemon, or seemingly healing a Pokemon in the middle of a match. Maybe there wouldn't be some, issue with the Switch 2 version where the resolution goes to complete shit. Maybe there wouldn't be issues where a Pokemon's gender is just completely fucking wrong. Like a female Gallade. Yeah, that would be weird, right? Because in the main series, Gallade can only be male, right? Yeah. Some of these issues, thankfully, have been fixed. Others are not fixed. Like, my friend actually ran into an issue where his male Hydreigon became a female. So, yeah, that was a mistake. It's just, it's... Now, I heard from people on Twitter, so take it with a grain of salt, but I heard this from some people on Twitter. They were defending the release of the game, so I don't know if this is valid or not. But I did hear Pokemon fans who keep up with the competitive scene or the development of the games more than I do, please confirm whether this is correct. I heard that Champions was already delayed and was way later than it already was when it came to its release. Like, it should have been released sometime last year, but they had to delay it because it just was not ready. It was in an even worse state. Which is... What have you guys been... If that's the case, what were they doing? Anyway, when the game released, the reason why it was released the way it was because it had to be on time for Pokemon tournaments and VGC. And if that's truly the case, if they did this just because of that, that is a really stupid reason. Like, did we learn nothing from Street Fighter V? I know Pokemon Champions isn't a fighting game, it's more of an RPG strategy game. I would say strategy, because there really aren't any RPG mechanics, but it's a turn-based strategy, battle sim. But it's like, Street Fighter V, if you don't remember, was rushed out the door for EVO. It didn't even have an arcade mode, and it had 16 characters. And for a fighting game that came out in the year it did, which was 2016, I believe, that's pathetic, especially when the most recent Street Fighter release, aside from 5, was Ultra Street Fighter 4, which had a whopping, 30-something characters. And now, granted, I'm no Street Fighter fan, but even I know that is just pathetic. And with Pokemon being rushed out the door for VGC, it's the exact same situation, and game developers need to stop doing that. I understand that tournaments are important, but it's like, you seriously couldn't just have Scarlet and Violet for one more year? Maybe have Wind and... I don't know. Like, they seriously couldn't have had Scarlet and Violet just for one more year, especially with how many options Scarlet and Violet has now, whereas this game has barely any content whatsoever. So, I'm going to sidetrack a little bit here and talk about my brief history with competitive Pokemon. Don't worry, this will actually be quick because there's not much to it. So, I was never really a competitive player until Champions. I did verse people in Pokemon battles previously, but it was mostly just with friends. And it was around Sun and Moon, I would say, where I was versing friends and I was starting to learn a bit about the competitive scene. And I was thinking, hey, this is pretty fun, thinking about Pokemon in this way. Maybe I should try getting into the competitive scene a little bit. Not necessarily like going to tournaments or anything, but maybe like training up Pokemon to be, more competitively usable, I became more competitive-minded. Then, afterwards, we had the Dexit stuff, and I got pissy and didn't really play Pokemon for a number of years, and Pokemon, well, was doing a lot of things that Game Freak... Game Freaked. And it wouldn't be until this year where I was finally willing to get back into the franchise, mostly because the entire Switch era was done, and Pokemon Champions was coming out, and I figure, hey, this might as well be a decent enough time to actually try the competitive scene. And that was my history with competitive Pokemon. So yeah, not very much. But I did train up Pokemon to make them competitive for the past couple of years in preparation for Champions, or, in preparation for whenever I get back into the franchise, because me and my friend wanted to verse each other again in Pokemon. And we are still playing Pokemon Champions. For what it's worth, it is the most accessible way to verse each other for Pokemon right now, which is nice. And you don't need a Switch Online account, which is also nice, because it's a free-to-play mobile game. So yeah, that much is really good. And for what it's worth, now that I've gotten into competitive Pokemon because of Champions, I can say this: the game is really fun. Mostly because competitive Pokemon is fun, but still, I have had a really fun time getting into competitive Pokemon with this game. I will say this, while I do feel like the IV system should have probably been kept and altered in some ways, at the end of the day, whatever, fine, it's just one less thing I have to worry about, and for what it's worth, because of how accessible the game is now, it is a great way to get into competitive Pokemon. I do feel like some of the tutorials at the start are a little hand-holdy, but thankfully they have a lot of optional tutorials that do actually help. One of the things I will praise about Pokemon Champions as well is that they also altered a few things to make the game faster, to make it more understandable. Like, a lot of terms that competitive players use, like priority +1, priority +2, all of those types of things. That's just an example. Contact versus non-contact. All of these now have actual genuine labels and names. And, like, there's more detailed explanations for the moves on what they do, whether they hit the opponent physically or not, whether they're physical or special, which has always been the case, but, it's back in Pokemon Champions. Whether something has higher priority than another move, what exactly a certain ability does in the moment. There's more detailed explanations on moves and how they can help you, which is really, really nice. They have some really handy tutorials to kind of help you with that as well if you don't know a few things, and I did actually learn a number of things that no YouTuber has ever shown me, so that's really nice as well. The tutorials, thankfully, the optional ones at least, are fairly quick and fairly concise. And yeah, you get some starting Pokemon, and the starting Pokemon are actually pretty good. You get a Sylveon. Sylveon's been receiving a lot of use lately, although I have my own Sylveon, so I'd rather use that. But still, it's nice to have one. Whimsicott, which I've grown to really enjoy just for Tailwind setting, and Tyranitar, because it's fucking Tyranitar. Tyranitar is also great because it has Sandstream, and Sandstream basically causes up a sandstorm. Pokemon Champions has actually been very weather-based, and it's been fairly fun, honestly. I know some people don't really enjoy Weather Wars. I know Gen 5, because weather was so overpowered and so prominent, a lot of people hated Gen 5 competitive, but Weather Wars seem to be a lot more well-received here than they were in Gen 5, but they've been very popular. In my case, I've been using Mega Charizard Y because he has Drought, which allows the sun to come out to play. But yeah, a lot of things have been streamlined or explained better, clarified better. The battle system has also been made much faster. Like, animations have been sped up, moves that, affect stats. Now, when they do the stat increasing animation, it goes attack and speed was boosted instead of attack increase, animation plays again, speed increase, animation goes down, and then yada yada yada. It's like, okay, thank God. They also have increase the general speed of the game. The animations are fairly snappy. That does not mean that they look good, but they are snappy. I will give them that. But yeah, things have been made better, which is really, really nice. The menu is fairly okay. It's a very mobile-centric menu, but it's fine. It works. I don't really have any issue getting to where I need to, so that's fine. I know some people have complained about it. I never really had an issue with it, so, everything's pretty well done. And because of that, getting into competitive Pokemon for me has been really, really fun. However, this is where we start getting into the problems. So I will say this. Before I start really, really digging into Pokemon Champions and really getting serious about critiquing it, I like Pokemon Champions. I've had a fun time getting into competitive Pokemon with this game, and I will always appreciate that. This game, because of how accessible it is, helped me get into competitive Pokemon and made me fall in love with Pokemon's turn-based battle system in a way I never experienced before, and I will always appreciate that. But I can't ignore the elephants in the room. Yes, there was an S at the end of that. There was a reason for that. The game launched in a really buggy state, but outside of that, it also launched in an underwhelming state. The amount of content here sucks. So, all of those new Mega Evolutions that we had in Legend ZA? Only 10 of them are actually in the game. There's Mega Dragonite, which they thankfully give you up front with a special event, and I'm pretty sure it never ends, so you'll just be able to get a free Dragonite. They have a couple of other Mega Evolutions. Some of them are good, some of them are bad. It really just depends. You can look into which Megas are good or not if you want to. That's a whole nother debate, but there are some of the new Mega Evolutions from Legend ZA, but then there are also just some baffling exclusions. So, how Mega Raichu was shown off in the trailer? I even mentioned it in my previous video. Mega Raichu X and Y were just not in the game. They are being added in a few days for the mobile release. They were advertised in the trailer and they're not there. Terastallizing, not a thing. Oh sure, it'll be added, but when? It's just Mega Evolution. And I like Mega Evolution. I think it's my personal favorite of the gimmicks. But why is it just Mega Evolution? And then there's also a lot of other megas that were advertised in ZA that are just not there. A lot of other baffling exclusions. So the Pokemon roster. There are, not counting mega forms or alternate forms, I believe 186 Pokemon in the game, which makes for one of the most limited rosters ever. I was already disappointed enough with the limited roster, not having all of the Pokemon at launch. But this goes beyond not having all of the Pokemon at launch. This is like, I don't even think you have a 10% of the dex. Or maybe you do. You have 100, there's over 1,000. Okay, maybe you have 10%. But it's like, what, barely 15%? Maybe? Like, seriously? 186 was the total you came up with? And, some people might say, oh, but the limited roster was probably carefully selected in order to have the balance of the game, be just right. No. No, it wasn't. So remember when I said I would talk about the recruitment system? So this is where the actual mobileness of the game comes in. Pokemon Champions has a gacha system for Pokemon. And unlike with, say, Pokemon, unlike, say, with the rest of the game, for items and themes and customizable stuff for your trainer, this actually does have stuff where you can pay to roll, I guess. Pay to test your luck, basically. The recruitment system works as follows. You get a randomly generated selection of Pokemon from the ranch with the farm girl that has been popping up all over, because people really like her design. That farm girl will let you select from a randomly generated loot box style selection of Pokemon. And you can actually pay to get more teammate tickets or recruitment tickets in order to, get different Pokemon. So this way, if you do not have any of the previous games, if you don't have any of the main series games, you can, find some Pokemon from the ranch and just have them in your party. You can recruit them temporarily, or you can recruit them permanently. I don't really need to do this. I only really do this to fill out my missions, which is really annoying that they made it a weekly mission or a daily mission, because it means I have a bunch of Pokemon that I rarely use, with a couple of exceptions. Thankfully, you can just return them if you don't intend to use them, and believe me, most of these I don't really intend to use because I already have them, or I just don't want to use them. And like with every loot box system, there's always going to be chances where you just don't get a good roll. See, there are some Pokemon that are here that are just not competitively viable. Like the Elemental Monkeys. Yeah, remember the Elemental Monkeys? Remember how their stats were fucking horrible? Yeah, they're in here. They're in Pokemon Champions. And then there's other Pokemon, like Stunfisk, like both Stunfisks. I don't recall anyone ever using them. I found one Galarian Stunfisk that I versed in a match, and he wasn't very strong. Pikachu's here because of course he is. I expected that. That was in the trailer. But there are also just other Pokemon that just are not competitively viable, and it's like, why are these guys here? I'll tell you why. It's because we need to have bad rolls. We need to have bad rolls in order to, have the loot box system not just hand out freebies for free. We can't, it's a loot box system. You can't just have every roll, every time you gamble, be a win, right? Well, that's why they're there. They're not here for competitive reasons. They're here for gambling reasons. Seriously, they are just here just to fill out space for the recruitment, just so you can roll a loss. The Pokemon are randomly generated. Sometimes they'll have abilities and stats that you want. Other times you'll have to change them yourself. And that's fine. But again, you can pay in order to get the Premium Battle Pass, which is $10, by the way, which I'm not paying for. There's also a bunch of other subscriptions you can pay for in order to get more teammate tickets You know, just in case you want to gamble your way. Oh, and there's also shiny Pokemon there. Remember shiny Pokemon? Well, you can get them at the ranch, you know, if you get lucky, if you get a good roll. Yeah, I just had to add a mobile gacha system. It's not that big of a deal if you have Pokemon in Pokemon Home, but if you are not a Pokemon fan at all, honestly, I would not recommend starting with Champions. I would recommend you start with the main series first, then, once you have at least one of the main series games, then play Pokemon Champions. Because this gacha system is just dumb. Like, yeah, it's not the end of the world, and events have been handing out some freebie Pokemon, and most of them have actually been fairly good. You get, like, a Charizard for Charizard X, you get Gyarados, you get Dragonite with its new Mega Evolution, and Dragonite is really, really good, and its new Mega is really good as well, but, like, come on. The Battle Pass also does include some Pokemon, which I kind of hate, because as someone who just wants to use Pokemon that I want to transfer over, it's really annoying when I'm just given a Pokemon. Because it's like, it's given to me as a gift. And yeah, I know I could just return it, but I mean, I already have it, and it's permanent. I may as well keep it. But, whatever. It's not the end of the world. Hey, at least the Gengar I got was actually fairly solid. So yeah, that's really dumb. But even dumber is, they didn't just put limitations on the roster of Pokemon, they also put limitations on the roster of items. The items are probably the worst part of Pokemon Champions. So, items, Pokemon live or die by the items they have. Items are one of the most important parts of competitive Pokemon. They're one of the most important parts of Pokemon, period. So you think they would take great care into including the best, most balanced possible set of items. There's barely any of them. There's so many items, even items that are shown in Champions that are just not in the game. The Rocky Helmet is actually on the menu, but it's not in the game. You can't purchase it. Oh, but don't worry. Despite all of the missing items that people love, like the Life Orb, or the Rocky Helmet, or the Heavy Iron Boots, or whatever they're called, Heavy Duty Boots, I forget what they're called. I think Heavy Iron Boots is a Zelda thing. Either way, despite all of those items that you love not being in the game, don't worry, guys. They have the Oran Berry. The Oran Berry. Don't give me that look. You know you love it. Yeah, the selection of items, I'm going to put it up on screen. These are all of the items in the game. And honestly, most of the best items, there's like a few that are really good, and then most of these are very situational. I mean, they have all of the berries that are important. That's nice. They have the berries. That's good. I appreciate that. Yeah, they don't really have much else. They have the Mega Stones, but again, I shouldn't really count those because that's to be expected. And even then, they're missing a lot of Mega Evolutions that could have been really cool to have at launch, especially a lot of them coming from ZA, you know, a game where Mega Evolutions are used completely differently, but you know, whatever. Yeah, it's pretty lame. So this means that if you don't want to use berries, or if you do want to use berries, I mean, berries can be very handy. The Citrus Berry is really good, and berries that weaken super effective moves can be situational, but they can be very useful if used well. There's the Lum Berry, which, you know, you're going to want to use. Sometimes you might maybe want to use like a Chesto Berry instead, or a Cherry Berry if you want to use it for something specific. You know, like, say, for example, you know, oh, you're worried about paralysis more, or maybe if someone wants to steal your berry item, this way, like, you know, they're not getting a Lum Berry, they're getting something that they can't really get use out of. So, you know, there's some strategy there. Alright, I can understand why those were included, even though they're probably very niche strategies. But yeah, these berries, including the Oran Berry, everyone's favorite item, I'm sure, were chosen over very important items like Life Orb or Heavy Duty Boots. or the terrain seeds, or assault vest, or life orb, or like other items. So yeah. So basically most people have just been using the same items. Some people have been using items that are very, very luck dependent, like the Quick Claw, which is fine for a single player journey, not so much for competitive Pokemon. Most people have just been sticking to Focus Sash, maybe the Focus Band, which isn't great, but it can have its uses, I guess. Leftovers, and the Citrus Berry, because it's the Citrus Berry. And that's basically it. It's pretty lame. And honestly, the fact that there are so few Pokemon and are so few items makes the game very stale after a while. I won't lie. We still have like 1 month to go before we get some new Pokemon, because they're apparently going to be rolling out new Pokemon once every 3 months. As to how many new Pokemon we're going to get, I have no idea. Hopefully it's not just like 1 or 2 Pokemon and then, oh cool, wait for another 3 months and hopefully we'll add one of your favorites. There's one other aspect that is a lot more divisive to people. For some reason, I don't know why it's divisive, I just think it's just a bad decision. But, so if you play Pokemon Legends ZA, you can get exclusive Mega Stones. Exclusive Mega Stones. Okay. Thankfully, these Mega Stones haven't really seen too much use. You get the Kalos starters and their Mega Evolutions. Mega Greninja hasn't really been that great, which is unfortunate because I really like Greninja, but its Mega Evolution is pretty bad, so that's unfortunate. Mega Chestnut, I hear nobody talk about. Mega Delphox is the best of them, but even then, I don't see it used that much in comparison to Mega Charizard Y or even Mega Charizard X. So, that's unfortunate, but it is what it is. However, they hid away a very, very good Mega Pokemon behind Legend ZA. And its abilities are so strong, it honestly might as well be like a pseudo-legendary, kind of, sort of. Mega Floette. Now, there have been videos made about Mega Floette. Some people say it's not that bad, some people say it's very niche, some people say, oh no, it's going down in usage, and other people say, oh no, it's broken. Mega Floette has been seen in a lot of tournaments, and has won a lot of tournaments, so the results are there. Mega Floette is very powerful. And keep in mind, this Floette is AZ's Floette, not regular Floette. No, this is AZ's Floette. You know, the one that giant character nobody cared about from X and Y. Although I hear he's better in ZA, so I haven't played ZA for the record. I don't know. I have heard that he's a lot better there, so cool. But yeah, Mega Floette was a Pokemon that was supposed to be given out in Gen 6, but it's even in the code, but we just never got it. Now, we have it with ZA, and ZA gave it a Mega Evolution, and it's in Pokemon Champions, and its ability is Fairy Aura, which is an ability that was used by Xerneas, so it's a really good ability. It basically increases Fairy-type damage by 30%. God damn. Now, there are alternatives to Mega Floette. You can use Sylveon, which has been increasing in usage. It's basically, Sylveon is a good replacement for Floette if you don't have ZA or if you don't have Floette. And I know some people are arguing, oh, well, you can just use Pokemon Home and use the GTS. Which, if that's your actual debunking of this, have you actually used the GTS? Get back to me on that. See, you know, actually try to get a Mega Floette and tell me how easy it actually is. Yeah, people are just willing to give up a Pokemon that you only get once in one game. Yeah, okay. I mean, look, I know it's possible. I'm not saying it's impossible. It's just, come on, how unlikely is it actually? Like, it's a gift Pokemon given to you at one part of the game. I'm sorry, no, it's not that easy to get on the GTS. It's not. Not to mention, there are probably going to be a lot of unfair trades. You're probably going to have to trade something you really like just to get it. And not everybody has the patience for that. You also have to use a frickin' mobile app to access the GTS. Which, yeah, is easy to do now, but it's also like, why the fuck is the GTS just not a part of the Switch version? Basically, in order to get Mega Floette, one of the best Pokemon of Champions currently, you have to play Legend ZA. You have to get Mega Floette. Now, thankfully, if you're just a casual player, you probably won't run into Mega Floette. Most of the Mega Floette players are hardcore Pokemon fans, so it's not that big of a deal. I myself have only run into one, and I didn't actually fight it. It was just on my opponent's roster, but he chose a different Mega. I don't think I've actually versed a Mega Floette yet, which is nice, but other people have, and it's pretty damn powerful. It's one of the best Megas of the game. To hide such an important part of the game behind, and yeah, it is important. It's like locking behind a character behind another game in a fighting game. Like, imagine if Akuma was locked behind playing a different Street Fighter game in Street Fighter 7. It would be stupid. It would be seen as really, really dumb. And yeah, it's really dumb here. Yeah, I know this isn't a fighting game, but the Pokemon are the stars of the show in a Pokemon game. So to lock one of the best ones in a competitive Pokemon battle sim, the future of competitive battling, it's a little shitty, don't you think? And yeah, I know they're going to make Mega Floette more readily available. I know they're going to give out its Mega Stone eventually. But they haven't done it yet, and we have no idea when they're going to. And no, before anyone says it, no, you can't just roll one on the slot. The slot does not actually have every Pokemon. It has specific Pokemon. It does not have every Pokemon. In fact, Mega Floette, I think, is like one of the only ones that isn't on there. It's not in the recruitment page. You have to play Legend ZA. Like, at least with Greninja, Chestnut, and Delphox, you can get them in other ways. Granted, you won't be able to access their Mega Stones, but at least their Mega Evolutions aren't hugely important or hugely good. I still think it's a really shitty thing to lock them behind ZA. I think if you just have a Greninja, Delphox, or Chestnut, you should be able to access their Mega Stones, but unfortunately that's just not the world we live in. But thankfully their Megas haven't set the world on fire, no pun intended with Delphox, so because of that, it's not that big of a deal. But Mega Floette is different. Mega Floette is like actually really strong. Mega Floette's been winning tournaments. And it's locked behind a game that not every Pokemon fan is gonna want to play. So yeah, I'm pretty mixed on Pokemon Champions. I still would say that I like it, because it taught me the value of competitive Pokemon. As someone who always wanted to give it a chance, who finally did so with Pokemon Champions, I really enjoy it, and I have to thank it for introducing me to the world of competitive Pokemon. But by God, the introduction, as fun as it was, could have been something so much more. And I know eventually it will be something more, but it's not something more yet. And it's unfortunate, because this game could have been so much more, but it just needed more time. Hey guys, future me here. And I have future knowledge of events that will happen with the next season of Pokemon Champions. Regulation MB. The M, I think, standing for Mega Evolution, or at least that's what I was told. So if I'm wrong, I will blame whoever said that to me. Either way, the newest update to Pokemon Champions has at this point happened. We did, in fact, get the Mega Raichus, which we already knew about. We got a couple of new Pokemon and a couple of new items. So I figure, on top of one other complaint that is really inexcusable that I missed, which I will get to in a sec. Do the new items and new Pokemon bring a lot to the table and really change up the gameplay and fix my issues with the lack of content? Not really. There's still several things missing, but on top of that, like, they didn't really add a whole lot of new Pokemon. I think they added, like, 20-something? And only like a handful of them are gonna mean anything to competitive. I mean, I'm still happy they're here. Like, we got the Hoenn starters. That's good. I like the Hoenn starters. We got Goldalego. I think that's how you pronounce it, or is it Goldego? Goldego, I think. The 1000th Pokemon. That's neat. I actually do really like Goldego, so I'm happy to have him. He was nerfed a bit, but that's fine. We have Annihilate, which is pretty neat. So we have a couple of good ones. Oh, Metagross. We do have Metagross. That is awesome. No Salamence, though. That sucks. They did add a couple of cool items as well. Like, they added the Life Orb, which is one of my personal favorites. They added the weather rocks. They added some of the other choice items. They added like a handful. If I'm being perfectly honest here, they didn't really add that much either. There's still several items missing. The Rocky Helmet is still not in the game. It's literally in the menus, but it is just not in the game. They also didn't add any new soundtracks from, or, you know, they didn't add any new music from any of the previous games. Because, like, one of the other things that you can buy at the shop is you can buy a grand total of 3 songs from previous Pokemon games. And it was just 3, so I was hoping, oh, well, they'll probably just add more. No, they didn't. They didn't really add any new clothing options, they didn't add any other customization for the trainer. They didn't really add much besides the new Pokemon and the new items, and that's really it. Oh, they did let us buy the Mega Stones for Delphox, Greninja, and Chestnut, the Kalos starters. That's nice. We still can't buy Mega Floette, though. You have to play ZA for that one, because of course, and it's still winning tournaments, so, you know, that's nice. Oh, this was a complaint that I know a lot of people who play Smogon have, which I'm also disappointed by as well, because to me, like, the fact that you can't do this is honestly kind of inexcusable as well. There's no 6v6 singles for private matches. Like, in private matches, you have to play by the regulations. You can't just play, like, whatever you want. You don't have an unrestricted format. Now, that's not completely at the end of the world. There are no banned Pokemon yet. There's no, like, regulation where, like, oh, you can't use Mega Evolutions, you have to use Terastallizing, and you can't use these Pokemon, but you can use these Pokemon, you know? There's nothing like that, but why they don't have an unrestricted format is just kind of baffling, and again, there's no 6v6, and it's like, I understand that's not the official format, but having it as an option would have been greatly appreciated. This is something I actually missed in the original video, and it's really, really inexcusable, so I'm surprised I missed it. When you are in the Pokeball and Great Ball tiers, if you lose a certain number of times, even so much as just one time, you may actually, there's a very good chance you'll have to face a bot. You heard me right, they have bots on Pokemon Champions. And literally, these bots, like, you can tell when you're fighting a bot when, 1, they have the shittiest team and the shittiest gameplay, no Mega Evolutions, sometimes they'll even use fucking Pikachu, and 2, when it says connecting after both parties have made a move, you can tell you're playing against a bot because they're just going to choose whatever. They don't really care about the moves they choose. They'll even use, like, really, really crappy movesets because it's basically just a win in your favor. Now, on one hand, I know some people might enjoy this because it lets them, you know, get VP faster. and it lets them climb the ladder faster. But to me, I always am just like, I'm so bored fighting these bots because they put up no challenge. And yeah, sure, I might lose to people, but it's also like, at least I gain something from losing to people because I see what I could have done differently, and I learn. And, you know, even if I lose, I still get an exhilarating match that made me feel like, oh, you know, hey, you know, I lost, but it was a fun time. It was a fun match. You don't get that from the bots. They put up no challenge. And you face them all of the time if you lose. Like, I'm not that good of a competitive player. I lose like 50% of my matches, which honestly for me is actually pretty good. I thought I would lose more. Throughout Pokeball tier, and even parts of Great Ball tier, you're just, if you lose, even like one time, you will face a bot. Sometimes, if you go into Pokeball tier, you'll just face a bot for no reason, even if you didn't lose. Once you get to Ultra tier, that's when it gets better, and, you know, so I would recommend you get to Ultra Ball tier as soon as possible. Hell, the game gives you the freebie because of the bots, like, all over the place, all over Poke and Great Ball tiers. But once you get to Ultra, that's when you start actually, like, just fighting players. You don't fight bots, thank God, but the fact that we do is just so stupid, and I don't understand why they do that. Oh, I almost forgot how to talk about... I actually did forget this in the original recording, but I forgot to talk about VP and whether it is pay to win or not. And I almost forgot here, too. That's pretty... So, is Pokemon Champions pay to win? Minus the branch and, you know, the Mega Floette. So I guess yes, because those two are a thing. Okay, well, how is the VP system? You know, the main currency of the game. Well, so far, I haven't really had too much of an issue with getting VP. You know, I've had like 50% losses, but I've also had 50% wins, and I've gotten a decent amount of VP from that. And they give away a lot of VP. If you were able to get to a decently high tier in regulation, they also give you like over 10,000 VP if you just competed, which is really, really nice as well. I don't know if it's dependent on how well you did, or if you just competed at all, but I got like, when the new regulation started, I got like 12,000 VP, and that's just, whoa. They also have tons of achievements. If you use a Pokemon a certain number of times, then you'll get VP. It doesn't matter what Pokemon it is, it's just any Pokemon. So I would say, so far, VP is fairly plentiful. It can be a little bit of a grind, especially if you don't have home or you don't train your Pokemon in the main series first, but if you do those things like I do, because I'm a loser, then you shouldn't have too much of an issue. I have heard from some people who have complained that it's a bit of a grind. Thankfully, you cannot buy VP. That's actually something I should have said in the original recording. You cannot buy VP. You have to play the game in order to earn it. And that's good. That is very good. I'm happy about that. I think even on the Battle Pass, they never allow you to get VP. So even with the Battle Passes, the only added rewards are Pokemon, their Mega Stones, titles, you know, little knickknacks, clothing. No VP, though. So thank God for that. And I think that's about everything I wanted to say. So back to past me. It's just unfortunate that this is what we're left with for now until it gets better, so. But I do appreciate it at the very least for letting me get into competitive Pokemon. And for what it's worth, me and my friend are going to be playing it for the foreseeable future, and I will still be excited to see when new Pokemon come out. Because of course I will. You know, half of the reason I got into Champions, in spite of its flaws that were very apparent when it launched, was because of the new Megas. There wasn't many of them, but hey, I was still able to use them eventually. So yeah, this is the last Pokemon video I'm probably going to have for a little bit. I might make a video about Legends Arceus and Pokemon Violet, maybe, But I wanted to make a video about Champions first because it's a new release, and Pokemon Champions is also kind of the current thing outside of Pokopia, which, while I've heard great things about, I'm probably not going to play Pokopia. I'm just not really into Animal Crossing, so I probably wouldn't be into Pokopia. It's not because the game is bad, it's just not my thing. So, you know, that's why. I heard it's really good, though, so that's really good. That's all. That's good to hear. Anyway, I am Lokai, signing out. Have a good one.